everyone, and welcome to SPED Homeschool Conversations. We are so glad that you are with us tonight. This is our weekly broadcast that we put on at SPED Homeschool, and we just cover different topics that are related to helping students who have specialized educational needs and parents who homeschool them, and how do you do that, and how do you make that work so you don't lose your mind. So this month we're focusing on community and building a community that really works for your family, and that's different for everyone. So we're just glad to have that conversation happening. My guests tonight are Darren Jones and Faith Berens, and they are both they both work with HSLDA. They'll have them explain that as we get started, and a little bit about themselves. But our topic tonight is homeschooling group options for special needs families. And so we just want you to know there's a lot of options, and it isn't just this is the one option you have. You somehow have to fit your family into this mold, but we want you to realize that you're going to be empowered to be able to see what works for our family, and how does that, how can I do that? And especially, we're going to talk about some state-specific laws as well, related to groups, and so hopefully we can get a lot of your questions answered. But we want to make sure that you are part of our conversation, so definitely put your comments, questions in the feed, and we will try to build those in as we can. And I also want to thank Bright Start Math for sponsoring this episode of SPED Homeschool Conversations. We're going to hear more from them about halfway through, and what products they have to offer that help students who have specialized learning needs. So Faith and Darren, to get started, could you just let our audience get to know you, the two of you, better? Could you please share maybe a bit about your homeschooling stories and about HSLDA and the positions that each of you hold there? And I'll let you two fight it out as to who's going to go first.
I'm going to defer to Darren.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I was homeschooled myself for my last couple years, and I came to work for Homeschool Legal Defense in 1996. So I've been there almost 25 years now.
Awesome.
I've been a legal assistant and an attorney working with homeschool families, and then for about the last 10 years, I've been working a lot with groups, answering legal questions and kind of helping them work through some of the issues of we want to start a group, or we want to change our group, or our group's running into growing pains. So that's kind of on the work aspect. On the personal aspect, my wife Sarah and I have been homeschooling our kids together for I think this is our 14th year, because we've graduated one who went all the way through, and our next one's a senior, and then we've got a couple extra. So I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Darren. Okay, Faith.
Yeah, so I am one of the special needs consultants on staff with HSLDA. I'm currently working about 15 to 20 hours a week for them, and the other hat that I wear is mom of two, and I just graduated a daughter, 18-year-old in June, and then my son is 10. Both of my kiddos do have some learning differences. And so, but we kind of fell into homeschooling. I didn't really intend to homeschool. It really wasn't on my radar, because I had been a public school teacher and a private school teacher and a therapist, dyslexia therapist. And so, so it really wasn't on my radar, Peggy. But when my own kids came along and they had their learning struggles, my heart turned to be home. So, God doesn't waste anything. And then he plopped me at HSLDA, which is such a blessing to be able to help other families who are homeschooling. And I get to work with an amazing bunch of people. And Darren is one of those. And I just am so thankful to be here tonight.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, if you are like COVID homeschooling, just because COVID had happened, and you're like, this doesn't happen to regular people. They get to think about homeschooling. Well, welcome to our community, where the majority of us entered homeschooling just like you did before COVID, because that was my journey 19 years ago, and it is pretty much the typical story for parents who have struggling learners. It's a desperation move for most of us. And so welcome to the crowd. You'll definitely find a lot of commonality with the SPED homeschool community. So yeah, that's like you said, Faye, it's a pretty typical story. A lot of even educators coming into as homeschoolers because their children are struggling, and you know that this is the best solution. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm excited. Well, because we're talking about homeschooling group options, let's first start out by talking about the different groups that homeschoolers usually get involved in. Just kind of maybe throwing it out there. This is what most people do, or options that we have.
Sure.
Okay. I'll talk some about my experience, I guess. As far as from my own personal experience, when I was being homeschooled, we were involved in, we call it a homeschool co-op because the parents were cooperatively teaching together. So that first year, I can remember every Monday and Wednesday afternoon, it was a real fun afternoon because we were getting together with other homeschoolers in our church. And mom taught geography and someone taught public speaking, which was great. I loved that, still do. We had gym class because it's really hard to have gym class with only 3 kids.
You can do it.
So
yes.
yeah, that was my experience as far as for when I was being homeschooled. Now, when my wife and I started homeschooling, we've been involved in a couple different groups. One was very much like the co-op that I was in, where it was parents taking turns teaching, things like that. And then another one was what we called kind of a hangout co-op. We rented the local youth development center, which had a gym and a couple classrooms, and then some just rooms to hang out in. And so we could go and my kids are not the sit down at desks and listen quietly type. And this co-op was designed for kids who wanted to run around and do hands-on things. I actually got to teach a class there that was a lot of fun. It was a class on great battles through the ages, and we acted out some of it. And I made a very strict rule at the beginning, which was, if you want to come listen to the class, this is where and when I'm doing it. And if you want to wander in and out during the class, you are welcome to do that. I will give the entire story, and if you want to be there for the beginning and the end and skip out in the middle and go play in the gym, fine. That's absolutely cool. And that's the kind of co-op that one was. Now, when I talk with co-ops on the phone and stuff, they want to do things like, dress codes. And how do we make sure that kids know they're supposed to raise their hand before they ask questions? That is a totally different kind of co-op, and it's great. It's wonderful for kids that like that. But there's this wide range. And Faith, I know you said you've actually been involved in a bunch of different ones.
I have. I mean, every year is just different. We just take it a year at a time.
And that's a good point. Yes.
Well, because your kids' needs are always changing, and your family dynamics and the season that you're in is always changing. One year we were taking care of my dad when he was sick. So, we just got together with some other families for field trips that year, or like special kind of on an as we could basis. But, the first year my daughter went to a private Christian school 2 days a week for some classes. Yeah. 1 year we met in people's homes. We used kind of my father's world as our spine, but all the moms just planned different activities, and we all brought snacks to share. And it was very casual, very laid back, and loved that. And then a friend of mine and a couple other moms, we started Stepping Stones, and Darren's wife and a couple of their kiddos came, and I actually co-taught with Darren's wife, Sarah, and we did fun grammar stuff like games like Mad Libs and games and poetry, and read aloud lots of stories. So it was more it was more casual, but all the moms
Right.
volunteered and helped and shared the teaching. And then this year we're doing something more structured. That's a drop off where I drop my son off 2 days a week for his core classes. And then I'm teaching the other 3 days a week at home. Of course, on Fridays, we try to do more fun Fridays and field trips. So there are so many options. And as
Right.
homeschooling continues to grow and morph, I just see more and more variations of how people are doing groups.
Right, because I mean, it goes back to what you were talking about. It's and Darren was talking about it too. It's the dynamics of the kids and
Yes.
what they need, but also the dynamics of the family and what on a year
Mhm.
by year basis are your needs that you can participate or you can't. I mean, sometimes you can commit to a weekly, drop off or whatever, but some years it's like, well, we can show up when we can show up, but I'm not going to pay a big fee for classes that my child's not going to come to, and that somebody's going to get mad at me for not being there.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely, you just have to take all those things into consideration. So those are some really good points. Darren, Mandy, one of our viewers, Mandy, had said that she started a special needs group on Facebook in the Middle Tennessee area, and she was looking to connect with you. Is there a way that I can get you or connect the two of you with an email or?
Yes.
Yeah.
My email is Darren, Darren, at hslda.org. Darren at hslda.org. Just
Great.
send it and I'll take a look at it tomorrow.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great. Yeah. It's wonderful that you guys are so accessible because that I know in group services is available. I hope I'm saying this right, Darren. Group services is available to people that even aren't members of HSLDA.
That's right. A big part of my job at the office for the last 10 years, but boy, especially this year, has been talking with people who want to start up groups, who want to help new homeschoolers. And yeah, it doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter in a professional way whether you're a member of HSLDA or not. Of course, I will encourage you to become so. But yeah, I mean, this year I've been dealing with everyone from grandmothers who want to start up homeschooling for, they've got a couple families of grandkids in the area. They want to do it. I've talked with retired teachers who are wanting to start up homeschool groups for the kids in their neighborhood. I've talked with even one guy who runs a martial arts studio and a math tutoring business that operate side by side.
Wow.
And he was saying, well, why, I've got phys ed and I've got math. Why don't I just add a couple other things? And it was a 2 or 3 day a week drop off and then the rest at home. And for those families, I mean, they're really grateful to get someone who had that expertise. I thought that was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, that is neat. Mandy said thanks, and she's a member, and she's going to get a hold of you. So, and back on that note, Darren, next week I'm going to be talking with Sherry Payne from HGAV, and that's what she does is to help groups get set up. And we're going to talk all next week on our broadcast about crafting your own unique homeschool community. So that's our topic next week. So if you're a leader or you're feeling the nudge that I got to do something bigger than just for my family, but for maybe my community, definitely join us next week because Sherry's going to have some great insight on that for sure. But yeah, HSLDA and Darren are great resources too for groups, and you guys have a lot of things to share out there to help groups. So, we've shared some options now and taking into consideration these. What may be the best types of groups for a new homeschooling family who homeschools a child with specialized learning needs to start with? And then what considerations should parents keep in mind for specific group situations when looking at getting their student involved? They may have learning issues, social issues, or physical limitations. Just what are some things that I guess parents should be thinking through is like, well, we're going to get involved in this, but what might be some things that we need to process maybe ahead of time before just jumping in?
Well, can I give the typical lawyer answer? It depends.
It depends.
I mean, honestly, this is something that's gonna be, you know your kids, you know what their needs are, and as we've mentioned, that can change year to year. But let's say you are a new homeschool family. Some things to look at, in my opinion, and this is someone who's I'm looking at it kind of as the lawyer who's been helping families who are in legal trouble and stuff. Look for what your weaknesses are. What's a group that can kind of come in and pick up the weaknesses that you have? You as a parent have strengths. You also have some areas where you may need some help, and so maybe look for a group that's going to give that help. As an example, there was a family I was helping with. This was in our litigation department back a few years ago. They had a son who had a really difficult learning disability for reading. And they we encouraged them to get involved with a group who actually had a reading specialist. Because the family had homeschooled 3 of the kids, no problem. Everything had gone swimmingly. But this one child, it wasn't working, it wasn't clicking. And so in that one, we were able to reach out and say, look, you need to look for a group nearby you that's got someone, in this case, there was someone who was a reading specialist. So if you've got a child who needs something like that, maybe see if you can find a group that caters, if you're looking for a STEM group, or if you're looking for an artistic group, if you're looking for one that does lots of activities, or maybe is more academically focused. Do research, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, because a lot of times we'll just say, oh well, so and so, my friend goes there, and so maybe we'll just go there too. But asking the questions, getting more information, I think that's great advice. Because oftentimes we'll just jump in off of somebody else's advice, and I think that's been proven that in our social media society that we often will take what other people tell us over the facts, and really we do have to get down to what's the day-to-day, what's this group going to be like, how's it going to function, what are the people that are involved, and like you said, Darren, just how does it complement what we're doing at home, what we need, what our child needs, that maybe a community might be able to help with. So what else, Faith?
Well, I just think, you all just make such really good points, and I just totally, agree with what you said. I think it really depends on the kid, and I think that you really need to think as a parent, what's going to be best for us and for my child. I love what Darren said, maybe look for like the gaps or the weakness areas that you need to shore up. It is very tempting to just, I know as a mom, as a homeschool mom, 3 of my besties are going to this group. And I actually had to really wrestle with that this year because 2 of my best friends and their kids were going to one co-op, and it's very academically rigorous. And these are some of my son's best friends, and he wanted to be with them. But I knew that wasn't going to be the best fit for him academically. And I didn't want him to be frustrated because, he has auditory processing disorder, and school doesn't come easy for him anyway. So we had to really seek out where was going to be the best fit for him, where was he going to get what he needed, but also be successful. And I always tell parents, that's like, we want to try to teach to our kids' sweet spot. We need to find, you don't want it to be too hard, but you don't want it to be too easy either. And so I just think you really have to take into consideration your kids' functioning levels, their needs, and you want them to be somewhere where they're going to be welcomed, feel comfortable. I think it's important to ask lots of good questions. to advocate for your child, to approach
Yes.
the teachers and the directors. Hey, are you willing to, do this because, or is it okay if my child brings, a fidget or their squeezy ball, or can they walk around and listen to the
Or
lesson and not
something
be
to chew
sitting?
on.
Yeah, something to chew on, whatever. Because,
Exactly.
headphones to noise
Mhm.
canceling headphones, just you have to ask lots of questions and advocate for your child. And you can't
Mhm.
just go somewhere just because it's the best co-op supposedly on the block or in your town, because that may not be
Right.
the best fit for your kid.
Yeah, those are some great points, Faith, about advocating and asking, because like Darren even talked about, there are some groups that are super flexible and they're willing to work and they're willing to let kids come and go as they're learning, but there's some that are very rigid, like both of you were talking about. And if you don't ask those questions ahead, I mean, that's where we see the most failures in getting integrated in a community for our kids, is because we don't ask enough of those questions and we aren't real about the realisticness. Just this is the situation, this is what my child does, this is what they need, and be bold with that, but also be understanding that some people are not going to understand that and you may need to keep looking, but those are all really good points that yeah that you made.
Peggy, one of the things that you can do kind of starting, at least when I'm talking with groups, one of the things that I work with them, and I'll bet you'll talk with this about Sherry next week, is helping your group design a statement of faith or statement of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that your group exists for? And so if you find a group, usually they'll have a website or a Facebook or a Homeschool Live site or something where you can go on and find out, what's this group's purpose.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to start. But also, one of the things I work with these groups is designing a code of conduct, and maybe they'll put that in their handbook or something. That's
Right.
another one where you can kind of get a feel for the group. And when I'm talking with groups, I encourage them. This is where you want to explain kind of what the ethos or the philosophy of your group is, and that can be wildly different. You might be the kind of group where you expect all the kids to show up in khakis and polo shirts,
Exactly,
but
matching uniforms.
if you don't tell them, they're not gonna know that. Um,
Right. Yeah.
this whole thing about unexpressed expectations of what we expect from our
Mm-hmm.
students and from our parents, it can be a problem, and that can be a problem that gets worse if you have a child who needs a bit of extra help. And is this the kind of group that will be willing to do that? I mean, I've got two kids who they need to know 10 minutes beforehand and 5 minutes beforehand that we're switching classes now and we're doing something else. And if the teacher just announces, okay, we're done now, meltdown and freak out time. So,
Right.
if you can talk with them beforehand and find out, is this the kind of group who will work with me? If it is, great. If not, you may have saved some wasted time there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. And you hate to have a bad experience, because that just leaves that taste in in you about this is what homeschool groups are like, and your child becomes more resistant to trying it again. And so the more upfront work you can do about, investigating in a group, and I know two of you agree with me in that, better off it is for everybody. It may seem like you're wasting time, but you're really not. Yeah. So I love that we have all these comments and questions. That we have people. Looks like from somewhere in Asia. It's probably morning for you, watching on YouTube, and also another hello from YouTube. We have one question about connecting groups. I don't know if we'll be able to answer this, but she's looking for social connections for children, online special needs groups. We'll have to maybe look into that, unless the two of you know something off the top of your head for that.
They mean,
Go ahead, Faith. You first.
I'm just asking a clarifying question. Did they mean an online group for the parents or for the children?
What online special needs groups would you recommend for families who are looking for social connections for their children? So
Oh.
yeah, for kids. That
Darren, do you have any suggestions?
Well, I will say two things. First of all, this is one thing I'm working on at HSLDA is to get a lot more. We have a website. If you go to our website, hslda.org, and you look for organizations, you'll find hundreds of in-person local organizations. What we don't have many of yet are the online groups. I'm working on that. However, just as a practical matter, for my kids, the way that they have found online contacts with, basically the nerds and the geeks around here is our local library has a teen game night. And if you walk into the teen game night, it's a whole bunch of socially awkward kids who love playing computer games and Dungeons and Dragons. And it's a great place for the kids. And it's now pretty much all moved online due to COVID. So check out your local library teen program. See what you got there. It's worked nicely for hours. In fact, my son was just running a role-playing game a couple days ago that went on for 7 hours with people who'd met at the library a couple years ago.
Yeah, I've got two
funny.
kids that do that too, and one's in his 20s, and then he drug his sister along this last time. So, yeah, it's once they get connected, then, but it's finding those first connections, and so looking definitely, like Darren said, even to community resources is sometimes the best way to get things started. And like we're going to talk about next week is starting your own group. That sometimes is the best thing to do if you're not finding what you're looking for that already exists.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a friend that utilizes Google Hangouts. So they just network with various friends and other homeschoolers, and then they create like a Google Hangout. We've been a part of Scrafty. It's Minecraft. It's a
Yeah.
I think it's a couple of parents, they're homeschool parents that started this. So it's an online platform that's safe. It's moderated, and so it's a safe community for kids, but they do all kinds of fun things in Minecraft. And then they actually have lesson plans in there. So for history last week, my son had to build a ziggurat in Minecraft because they were studying, Samaria and all that ancient civilization. So Scrafty, you might check that out. I do like some of the out school classes because the kids can interact with one another. There's some really interesting topics on there.
Cool. Yeah.
So
yeah, we've done a couple out school ones as well, and they've gone very well.
Awesome. So I guess Patrice was asking a question about transitioning. How do we find a group that fits? I think just watch this broadcast and we'll hopefully answer a lot of those questions. And then HSLDA Education Consultants put up, is this where people would go to find the different groups?
Yes, that's correct. And you can look for national groups, and then you can look by county by county.
Okay.
And we're working on making that better. Right now, all you can do is check your county and your state. Check all of them. We're working to make it so that you can actually search by zip code and by interest as well. Take a look after the holidays, and I'm hoping we've got a nice, excellent tool up there. It's good now. I just want to make it excellent.
Oh, and also, it looks like someone asked how do you spell Scrafty. So it's SKRAFTY, Minecraft Homeschool, or whenyourriseup.com.
yes.
So if you're listening on the podcast, that's how to spell that, and the website. So if you can't see it on the screen. So that's awesome. Well, we're already halfway through, and so I'm going to give Darren and Faith just a quick break, but we have a whole lot more to talk about when they come back. We're going to hear from our sponsor, and then continue this conversation about just connecting and finding a group different options for children who have special needs. So all right, I'll give you guys a break here, and we're going to hear a little bit from our sponsor, Right Start Math. So if you've ever heard Right Start Math, they want to help your child understand, apply, and enjoy mathematics using games to learn concepts, strategies, and to practice math facts. This unique program uses visualization of quantities and de-emphasizes counting and provides strategies, which are visual pictures for learning the facts. Place value is introduced early to solidify a child's understanding. And the primary tool is an AL abacus, a specifically designed two-sided abacus that's kinesthetic and visual. Also, they asked, do your children like to play games? Well, they have those too. They have over 300 math card games that the kids will love, and they want to help your child achieve success by getting rid of the frustrations and the tears and having fun with math instead. So definitely, if you're thinking, I don't know what we're going to use for math, definitely check them out. They're a great resource, and they're one of our partners at SPED Homeschool here. And their sponsorship makes these broadcasts happen, as well as donations from viewers like you. So we are a nonprofit, and we appreciate that. So I'm going to bring back our guests. It looks like you two of you now switch spots. That's great. So yeah, we've filled this first part of the hour with some great information. I appreciate both of you. As we talked a little bit about accommodations or support for families that are going to be using groups. How have you seen that done in the past that may provide encouragement for other families on different types of things that, I know my child needs some kind of support, and what can I ask? What might be reasonable to come into a group and say, this is something my child needs, or if they're dealing with a specific diagnoses, what might work best in a situation like a co-op where it'd be a little more flexible, because a lot of people I know have been pulling their kids out of school, and the school situation, it works, why would I put them in a classroom setting? But maybe a co-op might be a little more flexible on that end. So yeah.
Do you want to talk about reasonable accommodations, what people can ask for and not ask for, Darren, from a legal standpoint? And then I'll talk about the more practical suggestions too.
That sounds great. All right. So here's the thing. When I am advising at HSLDA, I'm usually on the other side here. I'm the one advising the co-ops. No, you don't have to do that. No, you're not legally required to do this. I try and encourage them to be as flexible as possible. But as a general rule, most homeschool co-ops that you go to are not going to be subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Right.
So there's a lot more negotiation and persuasion and asking, rather than what you can do with a public school, which is walk in with a letter from a lawyer that, slap it down on the table.
Right.
Reasonable accommodation is what the law says that, the public accommodations are required to make. And those are going to be like your homeschool conferences and things like that. Your local co-op probably isn't going to be that way. That being said, most of the groups that I talk to actually want to help families with special needs students. It's just trying to figure out the best way to do that. In my experience, and again, I'm kind of looking at it from the other side here, the groups that I have found that are kind of more the activity-oriented, field trip, supplemental, they tend to be more flexible and willing to work with you than the ones that are academically rigorous, and they expect that, if you're coming in ninth grade, you had best already have 3 years of Latin before you come in, because they're not going to start you in a primer in ninth grade. That's at least my experience, and perhaps I'm tarring with too broad a brush here, but that's what I've seen. So Faith, ideas on how you can do that negotiating and persuading?
Yeah, well, as a parent, so I can come at this from a parent, and then I can kind of come at this from having run co-ops and help to start one and start a private school that served homeschoolers. So, I mean, as a mom, I just think it's just, again, ask lots of questions and just be willing to be open and transparent and vulnerable. You know, can we have, you know, a consultation, or can we meet ahead of time? I would like you to get to know my child a little better. These are, you know, his strengths. These are his weaknesses. This is what we've done at home to help him. You know, is that possible? Or, you know, how could you envision this working in the classroom setting? And giving them some simple ideas. I mean, you don't want to come in and be overbearing and demanding and my kid needs this and, you know, I need you to do this. I mean, it's, you know, you want to establish a good relationship and rapport.
Right.
And
especially if you come from the public school, a lot of parents, you know, that free and appropriate, you know, education, they kind of have that mindset. I need to fight for what I need, and it's you need to have a much more gentle approach. Definitely.
Yes. Yeah. You catch more. What is it? You catch more flies with honey, or catch more whatever. Right. Anyway, yeah. So yeah. So, but you know, I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask for, you know, can my student maybe have frequent breaks, or can they bring something in that helps them to feel comfortable? Again, you know, maybe the co-op that you're really interested in does have a dress code of those khaki pants, or, you know, denim and a certain shirt, but you have a child with sensory that will not wear the, you know, we had that in our co-op, and you know, the child was allowed to wear black sweatpants because that's all he ever wore was sweatpants with a drawstring. That's fine, you know. So I think co-ops need to be a little more flexible, and most of the time they are willing to work with parents, but asking for maybe like a sensory zone, or can we bring a visual could we bring a visual clock timer, or talking like Darren gave the example of his kids need more warning. They don't transition well. Well, neither does my son. You know, it's like he goes into freak out mode. You know, using a visual schedule or some type of signal, you know, let's establish some type of code or signal that, you know, for the student, and maybe you don't even have to say anything, they learn, you know, it's tap 2 times on your right hand or your shoulder is your 10-minute warning, and then I'm going to come back in 5 minutes. So it's a lot of just collaborating and talking and sharing with one another. But those are some things that I think parents can do, but also as a teacher, you know, just being willing to provide the fidgets, sensory things, letting students move around while they don't necessarily have to be sitting in a chair, or maybe the kid needs to have, you know, bring their weighted blanket, or you need to allow them to use some type of assistive technology rather than, you know, maybe it is an academically rigorous co-op and the student's able to do the work if they're allowed to use an assistive tech tool to get the work done. So maybe they can't do IEW writing where they're writing everything out and rewriting it and dressing it up, but they could type it or dictate it. So again, it's just a lot of collaborating and having those conversations with the teachers, and how can we modify this curriculum or what you've chosen to do to make it work for my student because he really wants to participate here.
Yeah. I remember when I was teaching a high school Sunday school class back a couple of years ago, I was teaching fairly high level stuff. We were going through kind of a survey of the Bible in about 10 weeks. So it was moving pretty fast, and it was at a high school level. But I had several students in the class who were of the fidget and move around type. And so I didn't make it a rule that anyone had to sit down. And I realized halfway through one of my classes, you know, about the time that the Sunday school superintendent was walking by, I had 12 kids in the classroom, all of whom were engaged and listening and asking and answering questions, And 2 of them were rolling on an exercise ball, and 3 of them were sitting on the table, and 2 of them were kind of standing beside each other, pushing each other. But hey, maybe you had a whole bunch of kinetic learners or something. It actually worked just fine for us. But I think that's the type of thing that you would probably want to talk with the teacher to find out, is that really acceptable? I'm fine with it. No, the other Sunday school class or the teacher who kind of tag teamed with me was military and very much more of the we will sit down and learn now type.
Yeah, it takes a certain personality to be able to handle that, and yes, you need to have the right teacher and the right co-op that is willing to say, well, this falls within our conduct, parameters, but it may just be a little different. And so, just finding out that level of flexibility, and then also just what the needs of your student are, and how much your student can stay within those parameters without it becoming an issue. Because a lot of those kids that do have sensory issues and movement issues, it can turn into behavior that wasn't specifically meant by them to be a misbehavior, but it turns into that as we as parents know. Our kids can bottle it up for a while and they take it out on us when they get home. Otherwise,
so along with that sensory and the movement needs, then too, I think that's another reason why it's really important to ask good questions. And one question, if you have children like that, would be is what are your class sizes and the size of the rooms. And so it's important to visit beforehand. And if you do have a child who's anxious or doesn't transition well, or to visit ahead of time and walk through, or even shadow, and what's it going to be like here, or just getting more comfortable in the setting.
Christy says, great suggestions. When parent co-op communication is optimized, a co-op can be a very beneficial tool for growth and stepping stones for independence for unique learners. That's very true. Yeah, we've got to get them out there. And it's scary sometimes, but like both of you have been saying, these groups a lot of times want to be, make an environment that your child can succeed in. And so definitely getting them, out to practice, they're just being in group settings, especially if they, want to go to college and they want to be able to learn in a group setting. These are some safe places to start doing that. I mean, when they're younger, it might be more of a, just an activity type of group, or something that, isn't like core academics or rigorous. It may just be, like you said, a gym class, or, just something that I can do with other kids and see how it goes, and then work up from there. So, yeah. So, even with all these considerations, I do need to ask, what do our listeners also need to keep in mind in compliance with their state homeschooling laws when it pertains to groups? Because we've seen some unusual groups pop up, mostly because of COVID, and I know this was happening even before COVID happened, but do you have any resources that could help parents find out, what's legal in their state as far as, co-teaching or working with other parents and teaching in their state?
So that's one of the things actually that our website is really useful for. If you go to hslda.org, we've actually got a nice map that you can click on, and each state will have underneath it information about, like, what ages do you have to homeschool, and do you have to provide notice. And one of the, as you scroll down a bit, one of the things we say for every single state is kind of, what are the rules about having someone else teach your kids? Every state is fine with you doing just like a 1 day a week or 1 afternoon a week drop-off co-op. No state has a problem with that under the homeschool laws. There may be other issues that I'm not going to get into now about things like fire code and zoning and daycare laws. That's total different issue. Just the homeschool laws, that's fine. The problem comes about when you have a program that looks a bit more like a private school than a homeschool co-op. And it still might be homeschooling under the law of the state. For example, Kentucky and California, they don't actually technically have homeschooling. Everyone's just a private school. And so when you get together, you also might be a private school, or maybe you're just a bunch of private schools having a private school convention or something. But there are states like, for example, New York, where if you start getting together 3 days a week and then doing homeschooling at home, the state education department does not like that. In fact, they say that's illegal. It hasn't necessarily been tested in court, but if you're in New York, you'll want to look carefully at that. On the other hand, if you're in Texas, who cares? Yeah, it's fine there. There's issues
There's a lot
like
okay in Texas here.
there is, although oddly enough, Texas is one of the ones that's given us the most hassle with the daycare laws for homeschool co-ops.
Yes.
So if it's a drop-off co-op where you're able to let them go and then you can leave, like the one that we were involved when our kids were little, it was actually a time for, the moms, like, 1 out of every 3 weeks you had to be there, but 2 out of 3 weeks you got to go away for a couple hours. In Texas, groups like that have actually gotten into trouble because the state says you're a daycare now. Which is, in my professional legal opinion, stupid. But yeah, so anyway, that's a long way to say, go check out our website. And if you can't understand it, then call me.
Yeah. So, and you heard Darren's email earlier, and it's hslda.org. Definitely. So we got a question from a parent, and this is really good. She said, my son is medically complex and developmentally delayed. He's 4, but is more like a 2-year-old. As he gets older, would it be okay to have him in a co-op class that's below his age bracket?
The answer to that is it's totally up to the co-op. As a general rule, yes, that's going to be fine. However, I have talked to a couple co-ops where they make kind of a distinction if the child has gone through puberty, but is still very much at the mental level of like a 3rd or 4th grade. They may require the parent or an aide or a sibling or something to be there with them, just for safety issues and to make sure that everything's fine. But as a general rule, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the nice things about homeschooling. I've got one kid who's finishing up his 6th grade math. He's way ahead of where he needs to be, and he's still working on 4th grade spelling. So homeschooling is flexible that way, and co-ops can be flexible as well.
Yeah. Most of the co-ops we've been a part of, they have like mixed age classes.
True.
And they look at the kids' functioning level, so they're pretty flexible most of the time.
Yeah, I know a lot of families that do that, and as long as you have a conversation like we were talking about earlier, it's keeping those conversations going and the dialogue open. That more than likely, because I know one of our team members, she has twins, and the one twin, that doesn't have as many learning issues. She's, at her age level, and the other twin is a couple years back, and that's where they're functioning. And the co-op is completely fine with that. So yeah, you'll find a lot of flexibility, definitely, with those. I'm looking at my questions here. Let's talk just briefly about families developing teams. I know I wanted to touch on that just a little bit because we often think of, just community as in other families, but a lot of times you as our parents have therapists they work with, or maybe different tutors or instructors. How do we build, how can we see them as our community too? And instead of just, we have to connect with other families, because sometimes maybe that's the only community we can have right now, and that's okay.
Well, I definitely think I always tell parents they need to think of themselves as like the administrator, not only of their school, but the head of the child study team, or like you're driving the boat. Your homeschool is an IEP. It's an individualized education plan. You're the administrator of your school, the special ed teacher, but you're also like steering the child study committee. So you have to have the team to help you, to partner with you to meet your child's needs and goals. And so pulling in those therapists. So I have a friend and a dear colleague, and she has twins, but her son went early for therapy, and with sensory and auditory processing. And I mean, those people just really walked through just a really intense time with her son, and he made such strides, and they've stayed in contact. And sometimes you just get interventionists or teachers or tutors that really do become part of like your family. I mean, they're part of your tribe, your posse, and you need them. And I mean, they just help your kids. I mean, I know I've had people that have poured into my children that they wouldn't receive something from me, or correction from me, or teaching from me. And then my son will argue with me over stuff. And I'm like, son, I am a reading specialist. Like I really do know what OUGH says, I do know that phonics pattern. I'm a reading teacher, but he'll argue with me. But if Miss Shelley tells him something, that's, he's taking that to the bank. So I think it's really important to have your tribe around you, and all those people are so important, and we need one another. We need community.
One of the families that I was privileged to help back a number of years ago, when I was doing a lot of litigation, was a family with an autistic teen. And in this one, they had someone who was providing some of the academic therapies and giving some advice on that. But the best relationship that I could see, as an outsider looking in, was actually someone who, it was another homeschool mom who the local co-op had found to help our client. I think she'd finished homeschooling by the time she got in touch with our client. But she became basically mom's prayer partner, support, encourager, and they met weekly it was kind of a combination of Bible study and prayer meeting, and planning for the educational week, and how they were going to be dealing with their son and what life skills they were going to be working on. And she actually kept at that meeting for years after the court involvement ceased. And it was a beautiful thing for me to see as an outsider, for someone who could come in and provide such a vital role. It was just really cool to see.
That's really neat, yeah, because sometimes you just need that other mind to bounce things off of, and somebody that's seen your situation from the outside, because we get so wrapped up in what our kids are doing. And I know we just had somebody in one of our Facebook groups, he posted, said, you're not doing an awful job, Mom and Dad. It's just sometimes it takes your kids a long time to get to a goal. But we beat ourselves up, and we fail to see what's really beautiful. And so having that outside set of eyes, I love that, Darren. That's really good, because we do need that, definitely. And that's what community does for us. It's what it does for our kids, and it's why we're focusing on this topic this month. It's so very important, that you just get connected, and like Faith and Darren have been talking about this whole hour, it's going to look different. It's going to not, it's not like we just look up the closest one and we just enroll our child, in the local, neighborhood group and say all is good. It's going to take a little bit of research and a little bit of legwork on our end. But when you do find that right fit, it's good for everybody all around, definitely. So, we just have a few minutes left. I definitely wanted you to talk about how our community can connect with HSLDA and tell us more about the services your organization offers families, especially families of children with specialized educational needs. And I'm going to bring up your website.
All right.
Sure.
Faith, you do a lot of practical stuff. How about if you start with that one and I'll talk theoretical.
Okay. Well, so HSLDA now has 12 educational consultants on staff. So we have high school consultants, early years, and then the special needs department. And in the special needs department, each of us have different niches or specialized, training. So, but the main thing that we do is field phone calls and emails from people all over the nation, just helping them with the practical things like, curriculum, or where do I find therapy, or where do I find a homeschool friendly psychologist? I think my child has a learning disability, but we've never gotten it diagnosed. Do I go to the public school to get that done, or do I go privately? So we'll problem solve with them. We'll help them program plan, find the curriculum, even help them practically with how do I set up my schedule to make this work when I've got, therapy 3 times a week and 5 kids I'm juggling and that type of thing. Sometimes it's just a shoulder to cry on and somebody just to bounce ideas off of, because quite honestly, I think it's hard for parents, for homeschoolers in general, but particularly when you have special needs, like if your family's not typical, if your kid's not typical, sometimes we face fear, or we worry about judgment, or we worry about, oh, my kid's not measuring up or isn't performing like so-and-so. So sometimes it's easier just to call and talk to a stranger on the phone than Sally down the street. And so that's what we are, basically. Yeah. We're mom consultants. All of us are homeschooling moms, or have been. We've either graduated kids or we're still in the trenches. So those are some of the practical things that we do.
So kind of more from a theoretical aspect, HSLDA started back in 1983 with the idea that if homeschoolers banded together, we could protect homeschooling as a big movement a lot better. And it worked, actually. So we keep track of what the laws are in every state. And so if you have questions about those, we can answer them. We also, though, keep track. Legislating season is coming up in just a month and a half or so in most states. And so we're already reviewing bills, and we'll be letting you know about good ones and bad ones and awful ones. And so that's a big part of our job, is to kind of keep tabs on the homeschool movement as a whole through culture. We are actually just putting out a book. I got my hands on a copy today of responding to a Harvard article about why homeschooling should be banned. So, it's our job to fight that stuff so that you can just homeschool your kid.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. That is so important, and it's definitely a vital role in the homeschooling community, and it's why we have the freedoms we have, is because of HSLDA and the state organizations that fight on the ground in each of the states. And so Sherry's going to be joining us. Actually, last week we talked with someone from the Arizona Homeschool Association, and next week we'll be talking with Virginia, but pulling all those resources in together too for you. But yeah, definitely, and I always recommend people become members of HSLDA, because you guys do a great work, but also having access to the educational consultants as a member is just it's worth way more than you pay for it. So
Oh, yeah.
definitely take advantage of that. So
Well, thank you, Peggy. And we so appreciate the work that you do. And I always
Thank
tell
you.
people to check out SPED Homeschool and the resources and encouragement that they can find there.
Thank you. Yeah, Faith is also on the board of SPED Homeschool. If you don't know, we are a nonprofit and it's board run. So yeah, definitely check out our website for all of those. I just have one last comment from our YouTube. Just want to say thank you all for putting on this evening. You are welcome, and you are welcome all to come back next week. We're here almost every Tuesday night. Take a little break around Christmas time, but also you can catch us and replays on their YouTube channel, or we have a podcast that we turn this into as well. So you can check out our podcast channel too, if that's just an easier way to do that. But I also want to thank Right Start Math for sponsoring this episode of SPED Homeschool Conversations. We thank them for being a partner and for sponsoring this time that we had together. So thank you all too for your comments, your questions. They were awesome. We loved having them in. And next week we're going to be continuing and wrapping up this theme on community, and we're going to be talking with Sherry Payne about crafting your own unique homeschooling community and just what you can do if you feel led. I want to start my own group. So we're going to get you some resources, some ideas, and she's definitely done that a lot, and that's what she has a heart for helping people to do. So anyways, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Faith and Darren. Loved everything you had to share. It was just a pleasant, wonderful conversation. Definitely enjoyed that, and thank you just for sharing from your hearts. And all that
Thank you,
do.
Peggy. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was fun.
All right.
Nice
Yep.
hanging out with you all.
Yeah. All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next
Bye-bye.
week.